number of issues regarding the equalization fund. And we all know as a country that there was a conversation in 2010 when we were coming up with our constitution, and it was agreed that there are some areas in our country which have been left behind in terms of development since we got independence, Madam Speaker. And this is something that was canvassed across the country, and it was agreed, and the equalization fund was captured in the constitution. Madam Speaker, it is unfortunate that since the realization of the equalization fund, this is just the second time that funds have been released to the counties that are supposed to benefit from the equalization fund, Madam Speaker. And we have had a lot of pull and push in this House, pushing for the release of this money, Madam Speaker. And I'm happy that recently 10 billion was released to the 14 counties. It is unfortunate that when we still have a balance of 39.7 billion counties, Madam Speaker, CRA opened another Pandora's box of going against the 14 counties. Now we are at 34 counties. We are going to the third generation formula, Madam Speaker. I don't know how many counties again. You know, there was a reason, a well-thought process why we had the 14 counties, Madam Speaker. You know, when I listen to my colleagues talking about pockets of underdevelopment in their counties, Madam Speaker, while some of us talk about underdevelopment in an entire county, Madam Speaker. For example, in Samburu County, we were able to get tarmac just a few years ago, 2 that get to Maralal Town, our headquarters, Madam Speaker. While some people are talking about tarmac roads connecting to villages, Madam Speaker. And so it is important for us as a country to appreciate the role that Equalization Fund plays and why these counties were thought through when we were doing our constitution, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to talk about the Equalization Fund, the monies once they are released to the counties. The challenge that we see is that once the committee or the people who sit at the county level, Madam Speaker, to come up with the projects that should be funded by the Equalization Fund, we find it that we are looking at very minute, small projects, Madam Speaker. A road of 8 million, a road of 10 million, a road of 11 million, Madam Speaker. Those are functions that the county governments can do. The whole important, or the reason why the country thought about Equalization Fund was to do mega projects that actually uplift the lives of those people in those counties. And so if it's a major dam, if it's a major water supply issue, if it is a road that is connecting a sub-county and a sub-county, or even inter-county, Madam Speaker. Otherwise, the lapse of this Equalization Fund will get here. And when you look at our counties, we are still at the same place. And so I will also urge the governors and even us members of parliament, because we have representatives in that board, Madam Speaker, that we should look at the bigger picture. It will not sail again. It will not fly. In another 10 years, 20 years, we are still talking about marginalization in our counties, Madam Speaker. Kenyans will say, you've had your time. You've had the fund. What exactly can people see that this fund has done in our counties, Madam Speaker? And so I would urge the governors, because they are the ones who are actually controlling most of this money now. And one other thing, the things that are agreed by the board, Madam Speaker, that these are our priority areas. The governors should stop going again to sit with their own finance people and sitting with a few people and rearranging what the people on the ground have prioritized to be done through Equalization Fund, Madam Speaker. And so I want that our governors can look at the bigger picture and see to it that this Equalization Fund, Madam Speaker, will deal on very critical issues for us. Finally, and that is what I want to conclude with, Madam Speaker. This whole issue of us as a country, when we see something working for other people, we say that even us, we want from the same place, or we want from that place. There is a reason, and I keep telling some of my colleagues, please come and be a member of parliament of Samburu and stay one day there. They will not even survive. First from the heat, from the no roads, no water, they will not survive there. And so let the people who benefit from the equalization fund benefit until when we are at a certain level of development. You can fight for your own fund.
Naisula, hold on. Honorable Kwenya, what is out of order?
Madam Speaker, the gracious member should be seated when I'm on point of order so that I can address the Speaker effectively. Mr. Speaker, you see, the member for Samburu is insinuating that we do not have the capacity to represent people anywhere in this country. I don't know from what premise she's speaking from, because she doesn't have the measure, so to say, to know what we go through as members of parliament. I come from a very cold area, and I believe that any member who is in this house can represent members of Kinangop.
Honorable Kwenya, when your time comes, you can also refer to the same, that they cannot survive in the cold of Kinangop. It's a point of debate. Honorable Naisula, continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And so I just wanted to say that even as we raise our issues and of the different counties and constituencies that we come from, Madam Speaker, we should do it appreciating the diversity of our country, the different challenges that we face in different parts of the country, Madam Speaker, but not fight or look like we are talking against each other, like demeaning. There is a certain narrative that has been going across this country, Madam Speaker, that all the funds that go to the northeastern region is just being embezzled. It's the one building Nairobi County, Madam Speaker. I don't think corruption is reserved to a certain part of this country, Madam Speaker. Corruption cuts across from the national government to all parts of this country. And so when you talk about issues of your region, please leave the counties that benefit from equalization fund to benefit, because there was a reason why the drafters of the Constitution and Kenyans put the equalization fund there. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Honorable Jackson Kosgei.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. While I support this bill, Madam Speaker, I think it is about time we as a country revisit this term, marginalization, with a view of trying to find out if equalization fund was given for 20 years, the question that follows is what happens after that? And what is it that is being done that within 20 years, it will have solved the issue of marginalization? As I scanned through the bill from the Senate, I was looking for one thing. What is the lasting solution? What is the long-term solution? For instance, Madam Speaker, we need to devote a sizable resources to exploiting the potential that these areas do have. According to the Natural Resource Development Society, or council for that matter, which is an international body, seems to be indicating that most of the areas we refer to as marginalized areas do have immense natural resources underneath. Do we think as a country that by exploiting these natural resources within the period given to the marginalized areas, we should have been able to develop a program that will exploit those natural resources and that will complement in the economy of the country? With that, Madam Speaker, I think we need to also define the nature and areas of marginalization so that we can avoid a moving target in terms of defining the target and the purpose of this fund. This will become predictable and it will become manageable in terms of divining the coal. With that, Madam Speaker, I support the bill. Thank you.
Member for Tinderet.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to support this report from the Senate. The drafters of the Constitution looked at the problems, looked at our country with very objective mind. Madam Speaker, you'll realize that the Equalization Fund was actually put forward by the drafters of the Constitution so that by the end of the day, we bring the whole country to one level. Madam Speaker, the issues raised, especially on the Equalization Fund, by various speakers, is actually very important. And I want to note the issues raised by members from the ASAL, members from the less developed areas, members from the marginalized parts of the country. And by marginalized or less developed, it doesn't mean it is not talking about the sun, the heat, and many others. There are so many factors that we put into consideration. The inaccessibility of places, the level of development, the poverty index, and many others. So, Madam Speaker, the drafters of the Constitution in 2010, realized that for us to be one nation, one people, we must bring all to almost an equitable level playing field, so that Kenyans in various parts of this country will feel that we are one nation, one people, one society, and therefore, this fund actually is trying to bring areas that are poorly developed in terms of infrastructure. In terms of, when I talk of infrastructure, I'm talking about road network, we are talking about water network to homes, schools, colleges, and various parts, even hospitals. A number of areas in this country, Madam Speaker, especially the northern part, are actually having a hospital up to almost 20 kilometers apart, some even more than that range. And while in other areas, hospitals and schools are in less than 3-4 kilometers away. So it will be good that this fund is enhanced. This fund is disbursed on time. This fund is well managed so that what the drafters or the intention of the drafters of the Constitution is realized earlier than scheduled. Because if you look at the schedule, this fund is supposed to take up to 20 years. As said by members, this is the second year, meaning that the last 8 years, the last 10 years, this fund has not been disbursed. It has not been utilized well. So the intentions cannot be realized. And in fact, it will even mean that there is need to extend the time frame beyond the scheduled 20-year period when the drafters felt that if this fund is utilized well, other parts of the country will come to par with the developed parts of the country. 2, the management of the fund. And I want to say that my constituency is actually one of the beneficiaries, but it is not the whole part of it. Areas where, because it is very hilly, it is not having good roads, the standards of living are quite low, and so many other things affect it. But I want to discuss this especially on administration of the fund. That as much as the money has been disbursed, it will be prudent that the county government, which is actually the administrator of the fund, should actually look into it to make sure that there is value for resources, to make sure that the funds are allocated for the roads, The funds allocated for the hospitals, the funds allocated for water, the people, the beneficiaries are actually going to get those particular resources. So, Madam Speaker, I want to say that this fund is actually very important for the whole part of the world. If you look at areas where we have no bridges, where we have no road network, where we have no hospitals, where we have no dispensaries, this fund is going to be very, very important. And I want to say this. I heard the member for Samburu Lili talking about the level of development in her region. I want this House to look at it, that we look our country as one. That one part of the country which is less developed is part of our country. The people who are low in development are also our people. And if we have everyone up, then the whole nation will develop. I want to take the case, I think most of what other nations have done. If you look at the United States, for example, in the 1920s, 1930s, we had regions, very dry regions. Even the Tennessee Valley, for example, which was actually one of the least developed parts. And even the Nevada and many parts. China has done the same. Many parts of the world have done the same. This is not something that we have picked it from the blues. It is something that any national leader, any leader who wants to bring his country to the same table, so that when Turkana is doing well, when Mandera is doing well, then anyone else could also feel to be part and parcel of that particular part of the world. So in effect, I'm just calling that, let these funds be disbursed on time, let this fund be increased, not to be at the same level as it were, and then this fund, let it be administered in a very, let it be managed very efficiently to make sure that the benefits that were intended to achieve, even the construction of hospitals, the construction of roads, the having water in those particular areas, electricity, and many others, will be realized at a faster rate, and therefore we will come at the same level as Kenyans and as one people. I support Madam Chair. Thank you.
Honorable Ngeno.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me also to ventilate into this issue of equalization fund. Madam Speaker, and like what my colleagues have said, Madam Speaker, the reason why the drafters of the Constitution looked into three areas where money was supposed to be divided, Madam Speaker. Because when you look at the Constitution states that money shall be divided among three entities. Entity 1 is the national government, Entity 2 is the county governments, Entity 3 is the equalization fund. Madam Speaker, the reason why the drafters of the Constitution looked at the equalization fund was because of so many reasons. And I think one of the reasons is, Madam Speaker, if you look at the concept of the colonial wars, if you look at the concept of even the colonialists invading other countries, it was because of fight for resources. When you look at tribal wars, wherever they are, whether from time immemorial to the current, it is because of fight for resources. When you look at even the political contests that we have, in every country, Madam Speaker, the bottom line is that everybody is fighting for resources. And that is the reason why we have all these contests. And I think the reason why the drafters of the Constitution felt that we should have an allocation called equalization fund was because they realized that from time immemorial, there are areas which has been marginalized, both by governments and by nature. Madam Speaker, when I speak about governments, I mean there has been successive governments in this country, from the colonial government to the pre-independence or after independence, we have had governments and successive governments. And when the drafters of the Constitution were looking at this equalization fund, they meant, and their major intention was that, look at the areas which has never had any favor by any government. And that was meant to be equalized with the rest of the country. Madam Speaker, there are also areas which have been marginalized by nature or by natural causes, areas which do not or is not even able to do agriculture and any other agricultural activities or economic activities, Madam Speaker, that can help those areas. This is an area where